LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the December 16th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've picked out the weekend's 16 best, most newsworthy clips for what should be a really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political analysis show for you all tonight. The political comedy source will be last night's Saturday Night Live. The last Saturday Night Live of the year had a whole bunch of stars, including Alec Baldwin as Donald Trump in a It's a Wonderful Life parody that I'll show you. And Robert De Niro came back as Robert Mueller, and I think he did not do as bad a job as the last clip I showed that I criticized so heavily. And Matt Damon was there as Brett Kavanaugh. That's all I put together about 2 minutes of the cold open. That'll be the first clip I show, and then some comedy from Weekend Update, all about the big topic, which is Trump is in trouble. The Mueller, I've been talking about it's Mueller time for the last few weeks, and it's gotten worse and worse. And is Trump a felon last week because of the Michael Cohen revelations? Michael Cohen actually gave an interview to ABC. There'll be a clip of that when I get to This Week with George Stephanopoulos' news summary. Rudy Giuliani, I have almost 10 minutes of Rudy Giuliani that's almost too painful to watch, but I'm sure you'll watch it with me along with all the other clips I have from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. I'll also have two clips at the end on immigration. Stephen Miller yells about immigration, and then sort of an Amy Klobuchar response, both from CBS's Face the Nation. Those are the only Face the Nation clips. And you can follow along. Oh, I just dropped my clip list. If I put a link down in the video description to my clip list, you can follow along my 16 clips I'm using, my sort of cryptic notes if you can figure them out. And I have links to all the sources of my videos down there. And if you're watching this as a recorded show, since I have two topics, I'll put some time indexes. So if you want to click right to the Stephen Miller topic, immigration topic, and then go back to the beginning. You can go back and forth as much as you want. The longer you watch the video, I think the better YouTube likes the video. So also give me a thumbs up down there if you like the 16 clips I picked out, my commentary and criticism I've added for you. So let me start with It's a Wonderful Life parody where Trump imagines if he weren't elected president with the characters I talked about before. And what's really amazing about this, some people say, why do you take these Saturday Night Live clips? What's the relevance of these clips? Well, Donald Trump actually tweeted, this is a screen capture of Donald Trump's tweet from 5:58 a.m. this morning. A real scandal is the one-sided coverage hour by hour of networks like NBC and Democrat spin machines like Saturday Night Live. It's all nothing less than unfair news coverage and Dem commercials. Should be tested in courts, can't be legal, only defame and belittle. Collusion? So, can't be legal. If you have your Constitution, I have my pocket Constitution here. You flip over to the First Amendment. I think Saturday Night Live is probably covered by freedom of speech. They can belittle the president if they want to. And if you want to see how they belittled the president, here is about 2 minutes and 8 seconds of the It's a Wonderful Life parody I described earlier that I will talk about with you after we watch it together over here.
All right, when's this party getting started? Woo!
Brett Kavanaugh, how's the Supreme Court?
Me on the Supreme Court? With my temperament? Are you insane? No, they went with that nerd, Merrick Garland. But on the plus side, when I tell people I like beer, they find it charming and not like I'm threatening violence. Yeah. Plus, I have so much more time now to hang out with PJ and Squee and Needle Dick Nick and No Means Yes, Nate. Hey, I brought a little present for you. It's a calendar. And every day is a different beer.
Thank you, Brett.
All right, Merry Christmas, everybody. Let's do this! Woo!
Hello, Mr. Trump. I've waited for this moment for a long time.
Mr. Mueller, I've been meaning to come to talk to you, but golf.
I have something for you.
Does it say subpoena or your final report?
No, report? No. It's a picture of my grandson. I've been spending so much more time with him since I don't have to investigate some idiot for treason.
Wait, it sounds like you know I used to be president.
Oh, I know everything. Everything.
Wow, this night has put everything into perspective. I've had an epiphany. I guess the world does need me to be president after all.
Yeah, that was not the lesson at all.
I want to be president again. I want to be president again.
Listen, Donna. Every time a bell rings, someone you know quits or goes to jail.
So I am president again. It's a Christmas miracle.
No, not the lesson.
No, that was not the message. I actually thought that was pretty funny. I don't think it was a crime. I don't think it needs to be tested in the courts as to whether it's unfair or I don't know. My interpretation of that tweet that I showed before, I mean, the only reason, if you're trying to come up with a reasonable explanation for this tweet, that might be kind of a fool's errand, possibly. But it seems to me it might have something to do with this National Enquirer scandal that's brewing, where Trump is actually in trouble, possibly for stories the National Enquirer printed that were favorable to his campaign. But the National Enquirer actually has some First Amendment right to do that without it being a campaign contribution, kind of in the same way that NBC News or SNL can do things that might help one side or another politically, but it's their First Amendment right to do that. But I think it's going to be pretty different in the National Enquirer case, although we're just starting to get the beginnings of that. That also is something that came up on Weekend Update and in several of the news clips I'm going to show later. But I did want to show one more political comedy clip. I don't know, what did you think of Robert De Niro did a lot better than he did last week. He seemed to know all of his lines. I really like Matt Damon as Brett Kavanaugh, although it was just a bare memory of his real Brett Kavanaugh impersonation. The week Brett Kavanaugh had his amazing testimony about the allegations against him, his I like beer testimony that he kind of referenced there. But I thought that was worthwhile to watch, and like I said, certainly not illegal. And the next clip I said, like I said, is Weekend Update, Colin, Jost, and Michael Che covering the main topic that I was talking about, and in some ways covering it better than some of the news summaries, as I will from the actual news analysis programs from the corporate media, as I will discuss after we watch this 2-minute, 26-second clip from the beginning of Weekend Update together over here.
This last week was a pretty bad year for Donald Trump. Just think about what's currently under investigation for him. Trump's campaign, his transition, his inauguration, his business, and his presidency. So everyone check your cards, because you might have impeachment bingo. In fact, Trump has reportedly told people close to him that he's worried he will get impeached. And by people close to him, I of course mean Sean Hannity and Colonel Sanders. This is a lot of legal trouble for any president. I mean, I'm no lawyer, but neither is Trump's lawyer. This week, Michael Cohen was sentenced to 3 years in prison, and he claimed he only committed his crimes out of a blind loyalty to Trump. But Cohen was clearly a crook before he met Donald Trump. You know how I know? He was hired by Donald Trump. The only questions on a Trump job application are, do you do crimes and want to do more?
President Trump responded to Michael Cohen's sentencing by tweeting, "I never directed Michael Cohen to break the law." That's my Trump. He was a lawyer and he's supposed to know the law. Fair, but you know who else is supposed to know the law? The friggin' President of the United States. I can't get past that. I mean, the Pope should know the Bible. Santa should know the meaning of Christmas. The president should know the law. Dude, we are paying you money for this. Am I bugging? Am I crazy?
Oh, not because of this. Federal prosecutors in New York are investigating whether President Trump's inaugural committee misused some of the $107 million it raised for the event, which I assume they blew on Photoshop.
I mean, he's the president. He's got to know the law. Doctors know medicine. Arby's knows meat. If I told you I'm an astronaut and you ask me about the moon and I say, the moon? It's been confirmed that Trump was in the room with Michael Cohen and the publisher of the National Enquirer when they discussed covering up Trump's alleged affairs, which alleged affairs is a very dignified way to say raw dogging porn stars.
President.
Alleged affairs.
Alleged affairs, but despite the colorful language there Michael Che used, raw dogging porn stars, he does bring up a good point about the alleged affairs thing, that the fact that Donald Trump paid off a porn star and a Playboy playmate right before the election so that they didn't reveal their stories of having affairs with him, and he lied about it in various different ways over the last couple years. That's not even a scandal. That I'm glad that Michael J. brings it up, because why isn't that just that? Even if there's no crime, and I believe there is a good chance of there being crimes, as I talked about last week, and when I was talking about is Trump a felon, the prosecutors in the Southern District of New York definitely think he's a felon, and I'll get into that a little more later. But why isn't that more of a scandal? And I think actually Saturday Night Live may have done a better job of covering the inauguration scandal than any of the news summaries I'm going to show you. Starting with NBC's Meet the Press. Chuck Todd, for some reason there was no package this week. Usually Meet the Press is my longest and best news summary that I show you. This one's less than 2 minutes, and it's just Chuck Todd summarizing the news. There's a little bit of imaging. They use some images while he's narrating, but it's all done live. Usually there's like a live narration and then a video package that is usually the best news summary of what happened during the last week. That is not what happened on NBC's Meet the Press. I don't know if there was too much breaking news, or their video package producer is off for Christmas, or why, but I think you'll see here, he did say Trump that he's showing how his presidency is not normal. He covers the Chuck and Nancy meeting that you saw Colin Jost was about to make jokes about in that last clip I showed. And then he makes the same point that you'll see on several of the shows, and I think it's because there's a Washington Post article that came out that said basically every organization run by Trump in the last 10 years is under investigation. And here you'll see Chuck Todd says it's like every part of his adult life is under investigation. And that's kind of true, as I'll discuss with you after we watch that 1 minute, 57-second news summary from NBC's Meet the Press this morning over here.
Good Sunday morning. As if we needed another reminder, this week illustrated again just how not normal the Trump presidency has become. President Trump's lawyer sentenced to prison. His chief of staff, his second one, mind you, is out. A routine photo op with leading Democrats turned into a taunting schoolyard smackdown. We're less than 2 years into Mr. Trump's first term, and just take a look at all the president's investigations among the targets. The Trump campaign, the Trump transition team, the Trump Inauguration Committee, the Trump family, the Trump Organization and the Trump Charitable Foundation, Trump associates, and finally, President Trump himself. Essentially, everything he's touched his adult life is under investigation. All of this may be taking a toll on the president. We have a brand new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll out this morning. On the Russia investigation, 62% say President Trump has not been honest and truthful. That's a growing number in our poll, and it's across the board, Democrats, Independents, and Republicans. Just 34% say he has been honest and truthful. 45% want to see the investigation continue. 34%, familiar number there, would like to see it end. And as if all this wasn't enough, on Friday night, word came that a federal judge in Texas had struck down the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and said it was unconstitutional. The judge ruled that the individual mandate is unconstitutional now that there is no tax associated with it. It got zeroed out during the tax bill package, and that therefore the entire law now has to go. Now, Republicans have sought to kill the Affordable Care Act since its passage, and the suit was brought by Republican governors and attorneys general. But the ruling comes as Obamacare, as it's colloquially known, is now more popular than ever, and it helped Democrats flip 40 House seats in November. So looking ahead, multiple investigations, a new fight over health care, a trade war with China, possible recession, and we haven't even mentioned the chances of a government shutdown at the end of this week. Happy holidays, everyone. Joining me now is the Senate Democratic leader, Chuck Schumer of New York.
And I will have a Chuck Schumer clip a little bit later. But I don't know, that happy holidays thing, that was a little bit snarky. And then he said we didn't mention the government shutdown when he actually did mention the government shutdown. By not mentioning it, by saying he hadn't mentioned it, he did mention it. So I guess it's not as bad as if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press dishonesty that you get at the end of every show, including this week, because, of course, there are multiple Sundays every year where there is no Meet the Press, but I don't want to go into that. Like I said, I don't know why there was no video package. That was an okay news summary. It was still one of the longer ones. ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary is longer because it has this very long Michael Cohen clip in it, since they had the exclusive Michael Cohen interview from George Stephanopoulos on ABC this week, or actually was on Good Morning America originally. And then there's a 2.5-minute news summary from Fox News Sunday I'm going to get to in the clip after next, which definitely has some pro-Trump spin in it. But next I want to show the 1-minute, 5-second news summary from CNN State of the Union. Jake Tapper saying the State of the Union this week is under the harsh light of prosecutors. And you'll see a lot of the same information you just heard in the NBC clip. And it's also this focus on Trump's whole life being under investigation, which I will discuss with you after we watch that clip together over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is under the harsh light of prosecutors. It may not be the most relaxing holiday season for President Trump. After weeks of mounting legal revelations, President Trump's heading into his final work week in Washington this year with nearly every aspect of his professional and personal lives under scrutiny. His businesses, his former associates, his campaign, his inauguration, and his charity. And the president is facing these probes at one of the more unstable moments in his White House, managing unprecedented turnover in his staff and administration as the government is now just days away from a potential shutdown. Perhaps that is why the president was so quick to declare himself the winner on Saturday, cheering a remarkable ruling from a federal judge in Texas who struck down the entire Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, and put health insurance for millions of Americans up in the air. For now, Obamacare remains in place pending the appeals process, but the president lost no time declaring himself a victor and calling the decision great. Republican Senator Susan Collins of Maine joins me now. She's a member of the...
And I will have a Susan Collins clip coming up. But one thing I want to say about those last two news summaries is that one of the issues they mentioned that I'm not really covering is this judge, this federal district court judge in Texas, that found the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, to be unconstitutional, and Trump tweeted about that and said how great it was, and most Republicans are kind of upset about that, although Fox News Sunday, they covered that as like the #1 story, more important than Michael Cohen, and it was the first story, although, well, those see in this next clip, Chris Wallace kind of justifies that as saying it's the breaking news. I'm not really covering it because it's just a federal district court judge who was basically picked by Republican attorney generals in what some, I know they call it forum shopping, but plaintiffs get to choose where they bring their lawsuits, and they chose this judge appointed by George W. Bush, who apparently is pretty doctrinaire, because even a lot of conservatives, even like Jonathan Adler, the conservative lawyer who was responsible for some of the original Obamacare lawsuits, said that this reasoning was ridiculous. I looked at some of it. I didn't read it closely, but I did look at the decision, since I am a lawyer myself, and it didn't really make much sense. It's probably not even going to make it past the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. This is just the lowest, federal district court judge decision. So that's why I'm not covering it, other than that commentary I just gave you. It was, like I said, a very important story, the top story on Fox News Sunday, and I'm going to show you their 2-minute, 35-second news summary. It does actually cover a lot of the breaking news of Trump in trouble, legal troubles, Although you'll notice that Kevin Corke, who does the news summary after the Chris Wallace introduction, does fit in, like no collusion, and mentions Michael Flynn might be the victim of entrapment, which is ridiculous. I'll discuss that later when I show a Rudy Giuliani clip about that. But here's the news summary from Fox News Sunday this morning. The third of the 4 news summaries I'm going to show you before the news clips, which I will discuss with you after we watch it together over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. We begin with breaking news. A federal judge has ruled the entire Affordable Care Act invalid. Obamacare will remain in place pending appeal, and both President Trump and Democrats are calling for Congress to pass new legislation. We'll get to all that a little later. But first, the president is already dealing with a possible government shutdown that's now just 5 days away. Meanwhile, prosecutors are producing more of the evidence that led former members of Mr. Trump's inner circle to plead guilty, evidence that implicates the president. Let's get the latest from Kevin Corke live at the White House. Kevin.
Chris, even for an administration accustomed to seismic shifts in the news cycle, it was without a doubt a tumultuous week, but few headlines could prove as potentially damaging to the Trump White House than those involving former members of the president's inner circle. 3 of whom are facing time in prison for a variety of misdeeds, but none involving so-called Russian collusion. Former National Security Advisor General Michael Flynn faces sentencing Tuesday for lying to federal investigators. The special counsel's office recommending he get no jail time, even as it has faced charges that the general was entrapped and inappropriately questioned. Meanwhile, in his first televised interview since being sentenced to 3 years behind bars, the president's former fixer, attorney Michael Cohen, claimed he'd repeatedly lied for Mr. Trump over the years and even set up payments to women to help aid his 2016 campaign, a claim strongly denied by the White House.
I will take the mantle of shutting down, and I'm going to shut it down for border
But we
security.
believe you shouldn't shut it down.
An Oval Office meeting with leading Democrats this week did little to quell fears of a potential partial government shutdown over the president's insistence that there be funding for a border wall, something Democrats say they won't pay for. A work stoppage that could come in a week in which backers of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, consider their next moves in the wake of a federal judge's ruling that the law is unconstitutional.
If the Supreme Court upholds, we'll be sitting down with the Democrats, and we will get great health care for our people. Let's say repeal and replace, handled a little bit differently.
That ruling by District Court Judge Reed O'Connor, Chris, does not impact Obamacare recipients in the short term, but it does set up a potential high court battle, and that is a debate White House officials would love to have. Chris?
Kevin Corke reporting from the White House. Kevin, thanks.
White House officials would love to have that debate, but most Republicans are not very happy about having this brought up again, since health care was the #1 issue in the midterms, on the November 6 midterm elections, and Democrats won 40 seats in the House, mainly because, and all the Republicans tried to say that they were for pre-existing conditions, and there were a bunch of questions about that. Like I said, I'm not going to cover the whole healthcare thing, but I think before I showed that clip, I pre-criticized it, talked about the things that Kevin Corke put in there, the pro-Trump spin. Although there were good clips, I at least liked the variety of clips that it was sort of like the video package I was missing from NBC's Meet the Press. So I'll give Kevin Corke credit for that, at least, or at least the producer. Kevin Corke's producer actually probably put those video clips in there, not Kevin Corke himself. But anyway, the final news summary I want to show you is from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Has a lot of the same information. It also has this long clip of Michael Cohen, because George Stephanopoulos scored the exclusive Michael Cohen interview, and it talks about Trump directing him. And there's sort of some political comment in here. Maybe it's just me, but including if you listen to George Stephanopoulos' intonation in this introduction here, there's sort of this slow-moving Yakov-Smirnoff joke. If you remember, he was this comedian back in the time of the Soviet Union. What a country guy. He would say, in Soviet Union, something is like something does something backwards to you or whatever. Well, this is like George Stephanopoulos starts off this introduction saying that Trump, when he was running, said that only Trump alone can fix the system, but in Soviet Union, system fixes Trump. That's the slow-moving Yakov Smirnoff joke. You can tell me if I'm crazy if it's in there. In this 2-minute, 11-second news summary from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. When Donald Trump accepted the GOP nomination back in 2016, he famously declared, "I alone can fix it." And as he closes out the second year of his presidency, Trump is increasingly alone in the White House, acting on his own instincts. But the system he promised to fix is closing in on him. The Washington Post notes this morning, nearly every organization the president has led in the past decade is now under investigation. His business, his foundation, his campaign, his inaugural, his White House face lawsuits, criminal investigations, and in just a few weeks, intense congressional oversight. So many of his closest friends and associates now cooperating with those prosecutors. None more outspoken than Trump's former fixer, Michael Cohen. Fresh off his sentencing to 3 years in prison on Wednesday, Cohen told me that the campaign finance felonies he committed were ordered by Donald Trump.
He's saying very clearly that he never directed you to do anything wrong. Is that true?
I don't think there's anybody that believes that. First of all, nothing at the Trump Organization was ever done unless it was run through Mr. Trump. He directed me, as I said in my allocution, and I said as well in the plea, he directed me to make the payments. He directed me to become involved in these matters, including the one with McDougal, which was really between him and David Pecker, and then David Pecker's counsel. I just reviewed the documents. Again, in order to protect him. I gave loyalty to someone who truthfully does not deserve loyalty.
He was trying to hide what you were doing, correct?
Correct.
And he knew it was wrong?
Of course.
And he was doing that to help his election?
You have to remember at what point in time that this matter came about, 2 weeks or so before the election, post the Billy Bush comments. So yes, he was very concerned about how this would affect the election.
To help his campaign.
To help him and the campaign.
And we are joined now by President Trump's current attorney.
Trump's current attorney, Rudy Giuliani. I can't remember if he laughs in the introduction his evil laugh like he always does to look like he's so relaxed, but that's the clip I'm about to show you is actually what the next clip here, and like I said, I have 10 minutes of Rudy Giuliani, and this next clip is a little over 6 minutes. Then I have 4 minutes from Fox News Sunday where Chris Wallace actually does some good cross-examination of Rudy Giuliani, because it just doesn't hold up what he's saying, and I'm going to watch the whole 6 minutes with you. I'm going to read your live comments along the way, and then I'm going to tell you multiple things that Rudy Giuliani says in this next 6 minutes that just aren't true, and George Stephanopoulos does a pretty good job of cross-examining him based on, what they said in the Southern District of New York. And remember, Rudy Giuliani used to be the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York, and the Southern District of New York, those are all federal prosecutors in the Federal Department of Justice that is under Donald Trump and his Attorney General and whatever. It's the fact that they say that Trump is a felon, that is a huge deal, and Rudy Giuliani's protestations to the contrary are it's ridiculous. It's pathetic, which, of course, is what he says about Michael Cohen, but it's not all Michael Cohen. And anyway, I'll discuss that with you after we watch this 6-minute, 10-second Rudy Giuliani obfuscation of reality from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning over here.
Michael Cohen, right there, he says the president directed him to arrange the payments. The president knew it was wrong, and he was trying to help his campaign. Your response?
Pathetic. The man is pathetic. That's a lawyer you were interviewing, and he says he directed me to do it, and oh my goodness, he directed me. He's a lawyer. He's the guy you depend on to determine whether or not you should do it this way or that way. Whether you're Donald Trump or you're me or you, I have lawyers.
But he's saying the president knew it was wrong and directed him to do it anyway.
Well, the president says that's false, and he said it was false. Under oath, He said it was false in his tape-recorded conversation with Chris Cuomo. He said it was false on 5 other tape-recorded conversations. He said on those tape-recorded conversations that he did it on his own to start, and then he brought it to the president, and then the president reimbursed it. Clear as a bell, under oath, must have said it 10 times. Okay, now he says the opposite. You're going to tell me which is the truth? I think I know what the truth is, but unless you're God, this man, you will never know what the truth is. He lies to fit the situation he's in.
The Southern District seems to be backing him up. I want to put up on the screen a sentence from the sentencing memo. They write, with respect to both payments, Cohen acted in coordination with and at the direction of individual one. That's in their own words, of course, individual one, the president.
Yeah, but there'd be no way they would know that other than taking Cohen's word for it. I mean, the conversations they had, even that tape-recorded conversation that we listened to, is just the two of them.
But they wouldn't write that if they didn't have corroborating evidence, would they?
They don't have corroborating evidence. I'm sorry, they don't have corroborating evidence. Plus, they didn't let Cohen plead guilty to a conspiracy. I ran that office. I know what they do. If I'm going to use a cooperator, I make him plead guilty to a conspiracy. Because then when he goes on a witness stand, I'm able to say, this is who we fill in as the co-conspirator. He pleads guilty to an individual crime that isn't even a crime. He's going to be ripped apart on the witness stand. Can you imagine what would happen on the witness stand? This is a guy who stood up in court and said, I was fiercely loyal to Donald Trump. That's why I did it. I was fiercely loyal to him. No, he wasn't. He was taping him surreptitiously, lying to him, his client. That's outrageous. Can you imagine how a jury's going to react to that?
Well, that's not the only evidence they have, though. The other evidence they have, of course, they've also cut a deal with David Pecker and AMI. And from the statement of facts on that deal, they talk about an August 2015 meeting between David Pecker, Michael Cohen, and an individual from the campaign believed to be President Trump. Here's what they say. At the meeting, Pecker offered to help deal with negative stories about that presidential candidate's relationship with women by, among other things, assisting the campaign in identifying such stories so they could be purchased and their publication avoided. Pecker agreed to keep Cohen apprised of any such negative stories. So it's not just Michael Cohen, it's David Pecker, it's AMI.
And that's why David Pecker got immunity. And that's why Corke doesn't get immunity, because Corke won't say what they want him to say. So I don't know. I don't know how true that is. So you got a serial liar who taped his own client and lied about it and deceived him, and taped about 10 reporters and lied to them and deceived them. And you got a guy who's been given complete immunity.
Office. You know how the Southern District is run. You know exactly how the Southern District is run.
No, I don't know. I don't know how the Southern District is. I'm disgusted with the Southern District. Yeah, I'm going to tell you another thing. You see what we're talking about? It's not a crime. It's not a crime, George. Paying $130,000 to Stormy whatever and paying $150,000 to the other one is not a crime. The Edwards case determines that. She was paid $1.1 million to be a no-show in his campaign.
As you know, Mayor, the Edwards case is actually quite different. The judge in that case said that if this payment...
George, it's not the judge. It's the FEC. The FEC ruled on the Edwards case before they prosecuted it. The FEC ruled it's no violation of the campaign finance law. The Justice Department went ahead and prosecuted it anyway, and they were embarrassed.
And the judge said that if it was in part to help the campaign, that would be illegal. You're right that the jury did not convict John Edwards, but the evidence in this case is actually quite different.
Wrong instruction. It has to be for the sole purpose. If there's another purpose, it's no longer a campaign contribution. If there's a personal purpose. Now, think about this. Suppose he tried to use his campaign funds to pay off Stormy Daniels. It would be totally illegal. If it's not a campaign expense, it can't be a campaign contribution. These are not campaign contributions.
But the corporate contribution from AMI would be clearly illegal.
No, it would not be. It's not a contribution. It's not a contribution. If it's intended for a purpose in addition to the campaign purpose. In the case of Rio Hunter, right, the payment of $1.1 million was intended to shut her up, and it was intended to avoid embarrassment with his wife and with his children. Now, which is worse?
Yeah, but
the campaign problem or the wife and the children?
But what you did, that's that case. Let's talk about the president's case.
Same thing.
No, it's not the same thing.
Yes, it is.
In this case, you have contemporaneous witnesses saying it was for the campaign. You have a statement of facts saying the president Donald Trump met with David Pecker.
And I can produce an enormous number of witnesses that say the president was very concerned about how this was going to affect his children, his marriage, not just this one, but similar. All those women came forward at that point in time. That tape with Billy Bush and all of that. It's all part of the same thing. And I know what he was concerned about, and I can produce 20 witnesses to tell you what he was concerned about.
2 weeks before the campaign.
You're damn right. And he was concerned about all of it.
Did he
How
ever
do you
make
think
any
that's-
payments like that in the past?
Nobody else asked for payment. In the past, I can't speak to. I wasn't his lawyer in the past. But at that point, these were the only two that were asking for money. And the amount of money is consistent with harassment, not truth. I have been involved in cases like this. When it's true and you have the kind of money that the president had, it's $1 million settlement. When it's not true, when it's a harassment settlement and it's not true, you give them $130,000, $150,000. They went away for so little money that it indicates their case was very, very weak. And look, Stormy Daniels now has to pay the president legal fees. I mean, this is ridiculous. And they're going around with this, and you're talking about all these other investigations. I'm telling you, George, they're going to go try to look for unpaid parking tickets and see if they can nail them for unpaid parking.
Well, as you know, the Southern District said
Unpaid parking tickets. You'll see that comes up in the Fox News interview. I saw someone in the live comments saying that the BBC headline on that interview was "Over My Dead Body," but actually he didn't say "Over My Dead Body" in the ABC interview. That's in the next clip when he talks to Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday, and I have that in the next clip, the "Over My Dead Body" statement. But he said several things in there, like the FEC ruled that the Edwards payment to his mistress was not a campaign finance violation, but it went. Prosecutors prosecuted him. A judge let it go to a jury, and they acquitted him on one count, but they were like hung on two other counts. And the case again, and that was much more attenuated in time from the election compared to Trump making these payments 2 weeks or something before the election, after the Billy Bush tape came, Access Hollywood tape came out, and Trump says, Rudy Giuliani says that you're damn right that Trump was doing it not for the campaign, and he says it has to be the sole purpose. And I've looked through, I haven't seen any cases about sole purpose. I've seen that the primary purpose, major purpose, but nowhere does it say that the sole purpose has to be to help the campaign. That was also kind of a ridiculous, almost nothing that, or basically nothing Rudy Giuliani said there had any basis in law as a lawyer. He's just doing PR spin, just trying to say what he thinks is going to keep enough Republican senators from voting to remove Trump from office. You know, they need something like all the Democrats plus 20 Republican senators, and I'll show you a Susan Collins and Roy Blunt clip in just a couple minutes. Well, another 4 minutes, because those are the next two clips I'm going to show after the 4-minute Rudy Giuliani clip that I promised you. Since that was the 6-minute clip, now I have 4 minutes of Rudy Giuliani, the "Over My Dead Body" clip, where he talks about the perjury trap and Michael Flynn, and for no real good reason, parking tickets come up again in this clip. If you go to my Twitter feed, twitter.com/LiberalViewer, you'll see I have a pinned tweet of my perjury trap argument bogus video, which I think it may also be on my YouTube page for new non-subscribers. But anyway, that's one of the things that Rudy Giuliani brings up in this clip, the so-called perjury trap argument based from Michael Flynn. I think that Chris Wallace does a pretty good job of cross-examining Rudy Giuliani on that point, although there are a couple things that he doesn't cross-examine him on, and then he says, you know, what a pleasure it is to talk to him at the end without cross-examining him, which I will discuss with you after we watch that 4-minute, 5-second final Rudy Giuliani clip together over here.
Talk this week about whether or not General Flynn lied to the FBI. Here he is.
They took a general that they said didn't lie, and they convinced him he did lie, and he made some kind of a deal. And now they're recommending no time. You know why? Because they're embarrassed that they got caught.
Does the president believe Michael Flynn lied or not?
I don't know if Michael Flynn lied or not. You got two contradictory things. You got the FBI saying at the time that he wasn't lying, and then we have no explanation, and the guy pleads guilty to lying. So I mean, I don't know what happened in between. I do know they treated Flynn in a way that came very close to violating his rights.
I'm asking a simple question. And the reason I ask is I want to put up a tweet from the president a year ago in December of 2017 when he says this: I had to fire General Flynn because he lied to the vice president and the FBI. He has pled guilty to those lies. The president a year ago seemed to know that Flynn has lied. Now he's not so sure.
The president doesn't know that he lied. The president knows what he knew it. But he knows what you knew at the time. The man pled guilty to lying.
No. He knows what Flynn said to his vice president.
Yes, well, that was a lie. But that's not a crime.
Well, I understand. I didn't ask whether it was a crime. I asked whether it was a lie.
Chris, you're going all over the place, and you're really confusing people. Look, first of all, no, you are, really.
Wait a minute. I didn't ask whether it was a crime. I asked whether it was a lie, and he told the same lie to the FBI and to the vice president. And you're quite right. Lying to the vice president isn't a lie. It's not very good. But lying to the FBI, lying to the FBI is a crime.
Right, and the more important thing about what the president knew or didn't know, because this doesn't involve the president in terms of him being involved in any kind of conspiracy or anything else. It's like if it's reported that one of my assistants, when I was a U.S. attorney, lied to the court. How do I know if he did or he didn't? He knows what he reads. The man pled guilty to lying. So yes, but we didn't know at the time. I didn't know at the time that the FBI had previously concluded he was telling the truth. I didn't know he had been deprived of a lawyer.
I think, Mayor, you're confusing people.
I'm not confusing people.
All right. Let me ask you three last quick questions. There are reports now that the special counsel is interested again in interviewing the president. Has his office reached out to you about sitting down for an in-person interview with the president?
Yes, there are several unpaid parking tickets back in 1986, 87 that haven't been explained.
Seriously?
We've got seriously, unpaid parking tickets.
No.
It was a movie theater where he didn't pay the proper fee.
Is the special counsel, does he want to interview the president?
Yeah, good luck. Good luck. After what they did to Flynn, the way they trapped him into perjury, and no sentence for him, 14 days for Papadopoulos, I did better on traffic violations than they did with Papadopoulos.
So when you say good luck, you're saying no way, no interview.
They're a joke over my dead body, but I could be dead.
Do they want to speak to the president?
I do have other lawyers. I am disgusted with the tactics they have used in this case. What they did to General Flynn should result in discipline. They're the ones who are violating the law. They're looking at a non-crime collusion. The other guys are looking at a non-crime campaign violations, which are not violations. And they are the ones who are violating the law, the rules, the ethics, and nobody wants to look at them. They destroyed Strzok and Page's texts. 19,000 texts. If he had destroyed 19,000 texts, they'd put him in jail.
Mayor?
Even though they can't, because he's the president.
Mayor Giuliani?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I get a little...
Listen, I love it, and please come back. To be continued. Thank you for your time. Always good to talk with you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Up next, we'll bring it...
And he's so happy to talk to Giuliani and let him get away with that whole 19,000 texts thing, which is also something Trump tweeted about, which is a totally bogus accusation based on some software capture error. That I read a Slate article about it. I didn't put it down in the video description. If you're watching this as a recorded show, I'll put that Slate article about why that 19,000 text accusation is totally bogus. And there were many things in there. I don't know. Maybe I should have gone through and tried to find the things that weren't bogus in what Rudy Giuliani was saying there. But I think Chris Wallace did a fairly good job of cross-examining him on the Flynn didn't really lie argument that Trump and Flynn's lawyers seem to be trying to make now, even though he pled guilty to lying and Trump said that he lied, and that whole thing about how the FBI agent said he didn't lie. What they said is he didn't look like someone who was lying, but he actually had been lying to everyone about the whole sanctions discussions he was having with the Russians, and why he lied. That is one of the big mysteries that may come out when the Mueller report comes out. And now that was all pretty ridiculous, but there are at least some arguments that are keeping the Republican senators in line, which is important because, oh wait, I dropped my Constitution. Where'd it go? Oh, here it is. If you read your U.S. Constitution, you know that Trump can be impeached by the House, just a majority vote of the House that the Democrats are going to control. But impeachment, that's just the charges. That doesn't remove Trump from office. It just puts a stain on his presidency, like Clinton had a stain on his presidency from being impeached. But removal from office has never happened, not even with Andrew Johnson. I think they came within, like, was it one vote? I think it was one vote that was Lincoln's vice president. And they impeached him for, like, firing his Secretary of War, among other things, which firing James Comey, that seems worse than firing your Secretary of War. But the point I was trying to make is that impeachment is just the charging. Then there's a trial in the Senate that requires 67 senators. So that's the 47 Democrats plus 20 Republican senators to remove Trump from office. So you need 20 Republicans to think that they're better off with President Mike Pence than with, you know, the alleged criminal conspirator currently inhabiting the presidency. And so that is an important thing to remember when looking at these next two Republican senators, Senator Susan Collins, one of the most moderate Republican senators, and then Roy Blunt from Missouri, also from sort of a swing state. The Roy Blunt clip is less than a minute, but this Susan Collins clip is over 4 minutes, and you know, she wants, it's kind of like during the Kavanaugh hearing, she wants to seem concerned, but in the end she is willing to give even the most specious reasons to stay on Trump's side. You know, they're ethical and legal and, you know, moral. What is it? I have it in my notes here. Clip number 9. Yeah, there are unanswered ethical, legal, and factual questions, but the real answer is always, we're going to wait for the Mueller report. So, and I heard that from multiple Republicans today. And I will talk about Susan Collins' answers that make me think that we're still quite a while quite a ways. We need more facts before there are enough Republicans to actually remove Trump. It's not impossible. It's never happened. But Susan Collins isn't there, and she's one of the most moderate Republican senators, as you'll see in this CNN State of the Union clip, where I think Jake Tapper does a good job of cross-examining her as to how we already know enough to really be concerned, but she's not willing to come to any conclusions yet in this clip.
Well, and I want to ask you, the last 2 weeks have brought some major developments in the Russia investigation and the Southern District of New York investigation. Take a listen to what former Trump fixer Michael Cohen said this week about his 2 campaign finance felonies.
First of all, nothing at the Trump Organization was ever done unless it was run through Mr. Trump. He directed me, as I said in my allocution, and I said as well in the plea, he directed me to make the payments.
So I understand that's Michael Cohen, and he has a history of saying things that are not necessarily true, but it's not just him making that assertion. The federal prosecutors, the Southern District of New York, stated in their filing that the president directed these illegal payments, and they were done in coordination with him. Does it bother you that the president of the United States is being accused of ordering felony crimes in order to help him win the election?
Well, let me point out that there are a lot of unanswered ethical, legal, and factual questions. But clearly, this was not a good week for President Trump, nor for his campaign organization. And these allegations are concerning. But we need to wait until we have the entire picture. And that's why it's so critical that the special counsel be allowed to complete his investigation unimpeded so that we can have the full picture.
I get that when it comes to the Russia investigation, because we're still waiting to hear the whole picture there. But when it comes to Michael Cohen, we kind of do have the whole picture. The Southern District of New York said that these payments were illegal. They were campaign contributions. And the prosecutors from the U.S. Attorney's Office there say they were done in direction of and coordination with President Trump. I mean, and now Michael Cohen is going to jail as a result of that and other crimes. Don't we have the whole picture there?
I don't think we do. For one thing, the U.S. Attorney's Office described Michael Cohen as being deceitful, as being motivated by greed, and pointed out that he was not a cooperating witness. On the special counsel side, the special counsel praised him for his cooperation in the Russian investigation. So we have two different pictures of Michael Cohen, and many of the crimes for which he is going to prison have nothing to do with Donald Trump, such as tax evasion. That benefited him. Lying to the Intelligence Committee is another crime for which he was punished. So the picture there is still murky, in my view.
So there is an audio tape of Michael Cohen talking about these payments with President Trump. I'm sure you've heard the audio tape. Do you not believe, you haven't seen enough evidence to convince you that Donald Trump told Michael Cohen, directed him to make these payments to get Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal to keep their stories quiet?
I'm not going to engage in speculation because I don't feel that I have the entire picture yet. I have charges and counter charges. Certainly this is concerning. I don't mean to imply otherwise, but I'm going to wait until I have the full picture.
There is, I mean, he is going to jail, but it's not just for that charge. But bigger picture, there are ongoing investigations into the Trump administration, the Trump campaign 2016, the Trump transition team, the Trump organization, the Trump Foundation. There was one for Trump University. And now we found out from the Wall Street Journal this week, the Trump Inaugural Committee. Given all those investigations, given the fact that the president surrounded himself with people like Michael Cohen and people like Paul Manafort, do you think that President Trump has respect for the rule of law?
I think this reflects the fact that President Trump put together a campaign organization with very little experience, with completely inadequate vetting. And I think that's what happens. This is what happens when you take that kind of approach.
I want to move on. You told...
Inexperienced, lack of vetting. That is a pretty weak defense of Donald Trump, where there are all these criminal conspiracies that, you know, his campaign manager, his national security advisor, have both pled guilty to felonies. That's the state of the moderate Republican Susan Collins. I believe she's up for election in 2020, and I hope a non-moderate Democrat beats her, or any kind of Democrat, because I don't know, for some reason, especially after the whole Kavanaugh thing, I found her response is kind of infuriating. And there was this whole answer about Planned Parenthood she gave, in that she did two different interviews on the Sunday morning news analysis shows. I didn't take the Planned Parenthood clip. You can see the full news programs at links I put down in the video description, like the sources of all my clips. I do have a brief Roy Blunt clip. I lived in Missouri for about 5 years, so I know Missouri's kind of a swing state, but it's kind of a more red than purple state a lot of the time. And Roy Blunt is a Republican. Dash just walked by Sandy there. I have a Dash and Sandy clip at the end for you. I'm still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 clips to go before the Dash and Sandy clip. The first one here is Roy Blunt from Missouri answering kind of an interesting question from Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press about whether he regrets his vote for impeachment back against Clinton in 1998. And he brings up that he voted to impeach Clinton for lying. And Roy Blunt, never really says he regrets it, never really admits his own hypocrisy, but just gives this sage advice to Democrats not to investigate, just to legislate if they want to keep their jobs. This is less than a minute long. I'll discuss it with you after we watch together over here.
You voted for all 4 articles of impeachment against Bill Clinton. 2 of them that passed were basically lying to a grand jury and obstruction of justice. Do you regret those votes?
Not as much as I'm sure he regrets lying to the grand jury.
But was it do you regret the impeachment process?
You know, I read I looked at Ken Starr's book. I think all of us, looking back at that, would not want to rush to anything that has all of the ramifications that impeachment has. If I was giving advice to my friends in the House, most of the chairmen I would have served with when I was in the House, my advice would be legislate, don't investigate, if you want to be rewarded with the continued opportunity to be in control of the House of Representatives.
Roy Blunt, Republican from Missouri. Thanks for coming on to your views. Good to see you, sir. When we come back.
So, am I right? Did he just, like, totally flip on his position on impeachment in 1998 based on, I read what Ken Starr said, who also seems to have totally flipped on his view of impeachment from 1998. But they totally flip without ever admitting their own hypocrisy, which that is just something that politicians have a skill at doing, that more so than normal human beings. You can tell me what you think down in the comment section, but I think that's definitely true. Now I have a just brief 1-minute clip of Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, talking about the Michael Cohen evidence. And in some ways, he sounds infuriatingly similar to Susan Collins, the whole I'm waiting for the Mueller report. But I don't know. Politicians always like to put off making definitive, conclusive statements. Susan Collins did it, and Chuck Schumer's going to do it here. It's just I hope all of these politicians who are doing this, like Susan Collins and Chuck Schumer, and I'm being bipartisan by pointing both of them out. I hope that when the Mueller report actually comes out, that they'll make some definitive statements, and especially some of these Republicans. But this is Chuck Schumer, the Senate Minority Leader, the Democrat from New York. Like I said, sounding somewhat like what Susan Collins said over here.
About the prospects of impeachment. In the last 2 weeks, we've learned that the president directed Michael Cohen to commit felonies. At what point do you believe the House Democrats, you were on the House Judiciary Committee in 1998, so you're very familiar with this.
Yes.
At what point are House Democrats obligated to open an impeachment inquiry? Nobody says that means you vote for impeachment, but are they obligated to start one?
Well, I'll give you my view. We should make sure that Mr. Mueller is unimpeded, that he finishes his investigation, and we should make sure that that report is public. And then we should make a decision on the totality. As you know, impeachment has a lot of different ramifications. We certainly think no president is above the law, but I think it's wise to wait for the report. More and more people are believing in Mueller. Fewer and fewer people, as your survey showed, believe the president. Let's get the report and let's read it, let it go public, and then let us decide.
Is it an asset or a liability to have the first name of senator if you run for president in 2020?
So, if you want to see Chuck Schumer's answer to that question, you can see the whole Meet the Press episode at a link I put down in the video description. But like I said, that was pretty non-committal from Chuck Schumer, and I don't know. Hopefully they'll all start taking positions when this Mueller report comes out. Some people say by the end of the year. Some people say by February or March, because Manafort is being sentenced in February or March. But sometime in the next few months, and more keeps coming out. And Trump also tweeted several things. He seemed, because they let the White House know, the Justice Department lets the White House know a couple days before the rest of us get to know that certain things are coming down the pike in the Mueller investigation. And so sometimes his flurry of tweets are a portent of Mueller revelations coming in the next 48 hours. I don't know, it's possible. Or it could be months, it could be days. That's one of the frustrating things about the Mueller investigation. So the next two clips I want to show are both of Representative Elijah Cummings, the incoming Democrat who will be chairing the House Oversight Committee, who, as you can kind of understand from the name of his committee, it's responsible for oversight over the executive branch. You might remember the Oversight Committee was responsible for all those Hillary Clinton Benghazi hearings. Well, first I'm going to show you Elijah Cummings talking about the Michael Cohen revelations, and he not only gives the wait-and-see answer, he actually proposes something interesting to hear more from Michael Cohen in front of Congress, not just in front of George Stephanopoulos, and I will discuss that answer with you from Elijah Cummings talking to Jake Tapper on CNN's State of the Union this morning after we watched together over here.
Federal prosecutors from the Southern District of New York have said that then candidate Donald Trump directed his attorney Michael Cohen, who's now going to prison, to make illegal hush money payments involving these two women that alleged affairs with the president. Your fellow Democrat, soon-to-be chairman Adam Schiff, says that the Justice Department should reconsider those guidelines that exist that say that a sitting president cannot be indicted. Do you agree? Should the DOJ reconsider those guidelines?
I think we should always reconsider laws and regulations. This is one we definitely should reconsider. But let me say this too. I'm hoping that Mr. Cohen will come before the Congress where he can tell the American public exactly what he has been saying to Mueller and others without interfering with the Mueller investigation. I think the American people just voted for transparency and integrity in our hearings. They want to hear from him. And I certainly would like to see him come in the month of January to before the Congress, and so that people's representatives will have an opportunity to ask him questions. I really
Your
think
committee?
He can come in any committee he wants to come to. But it would be nice if he came before our committee. But the fact is that I think this is a watershed moment, Jake. Remember John Dean with regard to the Nixon tapes and the testimony that he provided. He changed the course of America. A lot of people said that, he would not call him a liar and everything else. But the fact is that he came forward. And I think surely Mr. Cohen should come forward and let us know what he has on his mind.
You think of the watershed moment as him going to prison, including for crimes about hush money payments to these women?
I think that is also, I think the watershed moment will be him coming. First of all, that's already a major problem for him and for the president. But I think the public needs to know exactly what happened, and I think that he can shed that light on it.
You told CNN earlier this
So that's definitely something to look forward to next month in January that I'll hopefully be able to cover for you in my Sunday live clip roundups. The testimony of Michael Cohen before some congressional committee. Sounds like Elijah Cummings wasn't necessarily saying he'd come before the House Oversight Committee, but as you'll see in this next clip, which actually preceded in chronologically the clip I just showed, I kind of put them out of order because all those previous clips were about the supposed felonies that Donald Trump committed by directing Michael Cohen to commit these campaign finance felonies. Now these next two clips, before I get to the final two immigration clips, are about the investigations that the House committees will do when the Democrats take over the House of Representatives next month. First, a clip of Elijah Cummings, and then a clip of Adam Schiff, who is the incoming House Intelligence Committee chair. But first, here's Elijah Cummings talking about, what are his highest priorities in terms of investigations. It's a little bit of an introduction from Jake Tapper on CNN's State of the Union about some of the things that he might investigate. And anyway, here's some of the surprising, at least one surprising priority from Elijah Cummings that has nothing to do with investigating Trump, and then also talking about subpoenas and his top priorities, which I will discuss with you after we watch that 3-minute, 14-second clip together over here.
Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm Jake Tapper. President Trump's Interior Secretary, Ryan Zinke, is stepping down from his post just before House Democrats launched investigations into a variety of ethical complaints against him. And that's just one of many, many probes that Democrats are planning to kickstart in fewer than 3 weeks. Here with me is the incoming chairman of the House Oversight Committee, Congressman Elijah Cummings, Democrat of Maryland. Congressman, thank you so much for being here. And probably next time I see you, it will be Mr. Chairman. But for now, we'll call you Congressman.
That's good enough. I'm honored to be here.
All right. So let you take the gavel for the House Oversight Committee in January. You've already mentioned you want to have hearings on prescription drugs. It's a big big topic of
Very
importance
big.
for you. Your job also includes oversight of the White House and the Trump administration. What are 2 or 3 subjects for hearings you want to hold in the first 6 months that are about oversight of the Trump administration and the White House?
Well, we have control over security clearances. That comes under our jurisdiction, and we noticed that there were a lot of problems with security clearances with regard to Mr. Porter, Mr. Flynn, and others, and Kushner. And so we want to take a look at that. But more importantly, we want to also take a look at this whole effort of voter suppression, because we think a lot of that sort of filters down from the White House. Remember, not too long ago, they created that voter suppression committee. That's what I call it. And so we've got
the voter fraud committee that disbanded.
Voter fraud, yeah. So we've got a number of things to do, but we're going to take a close look at this administration. But more importantly, we're going to be fighting for the American people and the things that they want.
So do you know what the first hearing?
No, we have not decided that yet, but I can guarantee you that it will likely not be what a lot of people expect. It will probably be something regarding skyrocketing drug prices or possibly the vote, things of that nature that people have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And, of course, the Affordable Care Act. We're going to certainly be taking a look at that, and we're going to make sure that it stays in force.
Over the last 2 years, as the ranking Democrat on the committee, you've asked Republicans to issue 64 different subpoenas. They have declined to do so. Are you going to issue those 64 subpoenas as chairman?
No. We may very well get to that point, but I plan to run our committee like a federal courtroom. I want civility, and we will address subpoenas in a very systematic way of those 64. There's so many, Jake, that so many issues that we brought up that would normally come up whether the president was Republican or Democrat, but there's so many, so we have to pull some aside and deal with the ones that are most urgent. For example, we're concerned about the census, which is right around the corner.
Right.
And we've got to make sure that we take a look at Wilbur Ross and the question of whether we should have a citizenship question in the census forms.
Federal prosecutors from the Southern District.
So that was interesting. Both the census question was not a priority I had thought of, and the prescription drug prices. I've heard Elijah Cummings talk about that before, but I think that the Democrats are showing that they have an awareness that they can't just focus on investigations, kind of like what Roy Blunt talked about in that previous clip, that they have to legislate, not just investigate, and they have to hold, if they're going to hold hearings, it has to be on things like health care and drug prices and things that matter to the American people before the Mueller report comes out. And although I would still like to see the Michael Cohen testimony, hopefully this live stream is going to keep going. I got this weird notice on the top of my live streaming page. Here you can see it. I don't know, there's a yellow and a red banner. That makes me a little bit worried that I don't know what comes next, but I don't know which video and audio they're saying is copyright. But of course, this is a fair use video where I'm giving my commentary and criticism on each of the clips, and they're newsworthy clips. And anyway, hopefully I'll get that all worked out and my stream won't be blocked. But I do want to move on to the final clip on the topic of Trump being in trouble. This is Adam Schiff answering a question kind of similar to what you just saw from Elijah Cummings, who is the incoming House Democratic chair of the Oversight Committee. Adam Schiff is the incoming chair of the House Intelligence Committee, and he's talking about an article that with a headline like he's going to push Trump's red line not to investigate his finances, and this could really be what gets Donald Trump. Could be the most important of all the clips I'm showing, and I will give my fair use media criticism and political commentary after you watch that 4.5-minute description of by Adam Schiff of all the ways he's going to look into Trump's personal finances, mostly, and this is really important, to make sure that Trump's motivations are, when he makes decisions as president, are for policy reasons and not his personal financial interests, which I will discuss with you a little more after you watch that 4.5-minute clip from NBC's Meet the Press this morning. Chuck Todd getting some really important information from Adam Schiff this morning here.
Welcome back. Turning now to the investigations of the Trump administration. In our NBC News Wall Street Journal poll, we asked people whether they support Democrats providing more oversight by opening up new investigations of President Trump and his administration. Overall, 55% said yes, while 42% said no. Take a look at the party breakdown. It won't surprise you. It was by a margin of 88-10 that Democrats said yes. They support more investigations. Among Republicans, the result was essentially flipped. Only 18% said yes, while 81% are opposed. For what it's worth, independents looked like the mix of the two, with a majority wanting more investigations. Joining me now is the man who will lead the House Intelligence Committee in the next Congress. It's Democrat Adam Schiff of California. Welcome back to Meet the Press, sir.
Thank you.
Let me start with an interview you gave to The New Yorker. The headline over it was Adam Schiff's plans to obliterate Trump's red line. Now, the reference was to the president had famously said, if they go into my businesses, if Mueller at the time goes into my personal businesses before the campaign, that would be a red line. That's too much. The implication being maybe he'd fire him or something else. What does that headline mean in practice, that you're going to obliterate the red line?
Well, obliterate was not my choice of words.
Fair enough.
But what it means is this. What ought to concern us the most from an oversight point of view is there any entanglement with a foreign power that might influence U.S. policy against our national interest? And what we saw in the Michael Cohen revelations, some of the Michael Cohen revelations, that the president, while he was denying any dealings with Russia, his business actually was pursuing a multi-million-dollar deal in Moscow, hiding it from the country, seeking the Kremlin's help with it. That's deeply compromising. Now, the president has wanted to draw a red line and say, you can't look at my business. But if the president's business is trying to curry favor with the Kremlin, we can't ignore that. And the president should not be in a position to say, you can't investigate certain things, only other things that I don't care as much about. So that's what I mean. If Mueller is not looking into this, and I don't know whether he is, someone needs to, because otherwise we're being derelict with our security.
What U.S. policies do you believe have already been influenced by that you fear might have been influenced by financial dealings with the president?
Well, unquestionably, the U.S. response to the Russian hacking of our election has been influenced by something. Whether it's been influenced by the president being concerned that his effort to build the Trump Tower deal would come out, because, of course, the Russians knew about it. They were on the other end of that transaction. Dmitry Peskov was involved in the cover-up of that. Whether that was the motivation, or whether there's other motivation, or whether it's simply Donald Trump reacting to the question that's been raised about his legitimacy because of the taint over the election, I don't know, but we need to find out.
Is Saudi Arabia fit into that in your mind? And is that something you plan on investigating as well?
Well, Saudi Arabia certainly could fit into it. If the Saudis were funneling money into the inauguration committee, or the Saudi investment in the Trump businesses, buying hotel rooms, the deals that Trump talked about during the campaign that made him love the Saudis so much, if that's warping U.S. policy, if it's affecting the president's unwillingness to criticize the Crown Prince over the murder of Khashoggi, then we need to know about it. Now, some of this may be the purview of our committee, some of it will be the purview of other committees. We will be working amongst ourselves to make sure that we don't step on each other's toes and that we work in a coordinated way.
What do you believe that Deutsche Bank financial records are going to show you? Because that's one of the things. This is a bank that the Trump organization did some work with. Why them? What will their records show?
Well, the concern about Deutsche Bank is that they have a history of laundering Russian money. They paid hundreds of millions of dollars in fines to the state of New York because they were laundering Russian money. And this apparently was the one bank that was willing to do business with the Trump organization. Now, is that a coincidence? What do we make of what the president's sons are reported have said about not needing to deal with U.S. banks because they got all the cash they needed from Russia, or a disproportionate share of their assets coming from Russia? If this is a form of compromise, it needs to be exposed.
You have...
So, like I said before I showed that clip, those are all really important questions. How Trump's personal financial interests may be affecting his policy decisions, and looking into Deutsche Bank, looking into Saudi Arabian money, given that Trump is like over on the campaign trail, you know, why shouldn't I like them? I like them very much. They buy all my toys, $40-50 million apartments, some yacht, some floor in one of his buildings. Saudi Arabia has had a lot of funneled a lot of money from reports I've read, and that's something the House can really look into. And of course, the Russia money, possibly through Deutsche Bank. It's that's why the title of this video is Trump in Trouble, because I think Adam Schiff pushing through that red line, that could put, I mean, it remains to be seen what he finds, but there seems to be a lot of smoke to determine whether there's fire. That's a little bit cliche, but anyway, so that's the final clip I'm showing in the Trump in Trouble topic. And now I have two clips from CBS's Face the Nation. This is the topic I called Stephen Miller Shouts About Immigration. This is really important because and it has a relation to the impeachment removal discussion I was having in the previous topic, where I said you need 20 Republican senators and in addition to the 47 Democrats to get 2/3 of the Senate to actually remove Trump from office. And one of the ways that Trump stops that from happening is to keep his base on his side, and he thinks immigration is an issue that does that. And he thinks, you know, because he promised them the wall, and the 35% of the voters who are like the strongest Trump supporters, they love the wall and they hate immigration, especially by, you know, brown people. And Stephen Miller is, in this next clip, he is one of the few hardliner, like white supremacist, Bannonite, alt-right members of the Trump administration that still survives. And he hasn't been out on the Sunday morning news analysis shows since, like, I can't remember when it was when he made that comment, like, Trump's orders should not be questioned, or that's a paraphrase, that's not an exact quote, but it was something like his edict, it's something about how, like, the president's orders should not be questioned. That sounded kind of fascistic also. And he looks really bad here. I've seen a bunch of people tweeting about, he has, like, you know, I hate to talk about someone's appearance, but he's such an evil guy. And in the introduction, talking about Stephen Miller, I think, well, it's not in this clip, but it seems like he's had more hair sprayed on, and it almost seems like it's starting to drip. It, like, he's really advocating for building a wall here, but I think at one point in this clip you may come to the conclusion that he really needs to build a wall a few, like a couple or maybe a few inches above his left ear to keep, like, his spray on hair from dripping down. But his answer here to the death of the 7-year-old, he's playing a game, and I'm gonna clean up his clip with a Senator Amy Klobuchar clip, also from CBS's Face the Nation, talking about immigration and this immigration issue. And kudos to CBS's Face the Nation for really addressing this issue in depth with these two clips, although they really pushed off the Michael Cohen and the Trump scandal topic to the second half of the program. And that's really bad for Face the Nation, because in some markets they only play the first half of Face the Nation. And Margaret Brennan had on Stephen Miller and Amy Klobuchar, and in between the two of them, Wyoming Republican Senator John Barrasso asked none of those three about Michael Cohen claiming he was directed to commit felonies by the president, asked none of them about the, you know, the Michael Flynn stuff and the Paul Manafort stuff. So at the same time I'm giving kudos to Face the Nation, I also criticize them for that ordering of the topics, and in that context, I want to start with this 4.5-minute Stephen Miller really evil clip that I will discuss with you after we watch it together over here.
Many more, and I want to actually switch to another area you're a key voice on, and that is immigration, and also want to talk about the possible shutdown here. One very particular case here, this 7-year-old migrant girl who passed away. She was a migrant from Guatemala named Jacqueline Call. She died some hours after passing into U.S. territory while she was under the protection of Customs and Border Patrol. Who bears responsibility for her death?
Our hearts break for the tragic death of the 7-year-old girl. The loss of that precious life is horrifying. It is a painful reminder of the ongoing humanitarian tragedy that is illegal immigration and the misery that it spreads. A coyote dropped off 163 migrants in an extremely remote section of New Mexico. Those individuals were found by Border Patrol, who many cases act as first responders. In fact, Border Patrol saves about 4,000 lives every single year. Unfortunately, hundreds die on the dangerous trek up. Smuggling organizations profit off death and misery. They are vicious, vile organizations. And it's time that both parties had the appropriate level of outrage over the fact that these organizations continue to take advantage.
Adequately equipped to deal with the record number of families coming across. Why aren't they?
One of the great tragedies that is going on in our country today is the loopholes in our immigration laws and the deficiencies in our immigration laws and left-wing activist judicial rulings that incentivize the most vulnerable populations to come to our country. Last year, 100,000. Last year, 100,000 unaccompanied alien children or children traveling with adults showed up at our southern border. President Trump took dramatic action, issued an executive order directing illegal traffic to the ports of entry. But a left-wing activist judge issued a reckless nationwide injunction on the president's order, putting thousands of lives at risk and further enriching these grotesque,
and a record number continue to cross. I want to quickly, though, get to, because we're going to run out of time, I want to get to this question of the border wall, which I know you're a huge advocate for. We are about 5 days from potential government shutdown, and Republican leadership says there's no plan. What is the president's plan, and will he shut it down to get this $5 billion in border wall funding?
We're going to do whatever is necessary to build the border wall to stop this ongoing crisis of illegal immigration.
And that means
this is a very, if it comes to it, absolutely. This is a very fundamental issue. At stake is the question of whether or not the United States remains a sovereign country, whether or not we can establish and enforce rules for entrance into our country. The Democrat Party is a simple choice. They can either choose to fight for America's working class or to promote illegal immigration. You can't do both.
Is there wiggle room on that $5 billion?
I'm not going to negotiate the details on air with you right now.
Well, Senator Schumer said this morning you're not getting the border wall in any form.
If the Democrat Party if the Democrat Party wants to go down the road of continuing to preserve a model that enriches smuggling organizations, that spreads misery on both sides of the border, that kills 300 Americans a week through heroin overdoses alone. By the way, illegal heroin costs our country $230 billion every single year.
You're talking about the intent of these migrants and trying to stop that, which really gets you more to the diplomatic issues of why people are fleeing in the first place, not the border wall itself. But
the largest increases,
are we going to have a shutdown over Christmas?
As you yourself acknowledge, the largest increases in illegal immigration are categories that are incentivized by loopholes in our laws and loopholes created by activist left-wing judges, including the district court judge.
I said there are a record number happening right now.
In the categories that correspond with these loopholes and the interventions, reckless, lawless interventions of district court judges. And this president has taken historic action to stem the tide of illegal immigration and to fight for working people in this country.
And this is his last best chance to get a border wall before Democrats take the majority.
It's time that both parties, and this is what the American people want, both parties to come together for the sake of American children, for the sake of children all across this hemisphere, to create a lawful system of immigration, not the lawless chaos that has been perpetuated for too many decades.
It's good to have you in studio. I want to get to one of the lawmakers who's going to actually have to do what you're telling him he has to do, and that is Wyoming Republican Senator John Barrasso.
And I don't have any clips of John Barrasso. Like I said, Margaret Brennan did not ask Stephen Miller, John Barrasso, or Amy Klobuchar at all about the whole Trump scandals, Michael Cohen claiming he was directed to commit felonies by Trump, all that never made it into the first half of Face the Nation. She did some good cross-examination of Stephen Miller there, although a couple things he kept harping on that jumped out at me that she didn't really cross-examine him on. Well, first he kept talking about the liberal, leftist, activist judges using loopholes in the law and he was talking about asylum there, about how they said that people had to go to ports of entry where they actually, it's a joke what they're doing. I mean, it's worse than a joke. They stop people from coming in. They put troops on the bridges so they can't get to the ports of entry, and that's why they go in between, like that a poor 7-year-old girl and her family. And the girl's father, I think it's the Call family, if I'm remembering the last name right, they don't even blame the U.S. government, even though the executive branch, Stephen Miller and the Secretary Nielsen of the Department of Homeland Security, are blaming the family for bringing her seeking asylum. And that's the thing, they won't let people come in at the ports of entry. They have this metering policy that they only accept a few asylum seekers every day. There's even this report I saw on AM Joy and All In with Chris Hayes over the last few days on MSNBC that in, I think it might be Guadalajara, somewhere in Mexico, they have like a camp where people are waiting their turn, and they're in like these indelible markers. They're writing numbers on people's arms. It's like this whole Holocaust reference almost, to when their turn is to try to seek asylum. But that the activist judges saying that that is actually what the law passed by Congress says, that even if you enter at a point of entry, even if you enter illegally, which is a misdemeanor to cross the border illegally, not as bad as the campaign finance felonies that Rudy Giuliani was downplaying earlier, that Trump is alleged to have committed based on Michael Cohen's plea allocution from last August that I still have down in the video description, and now the sentencing memo that's been accepted by the prosecutors in the Southern District of New York and the judge who also had his memo comments. But I want to get back to the second thing that Stephen Miller talked about, the opiate epidemic and the heroin coming over the border. Well, heroin actually comes through the ports of entry, not illegally. They have to search vehicles, and that's a whole different kind of border security than the wall. So that was all ridiculous. And my one silver lining of how evil that whole thing was is that is going to be increasingly the face of Trump if he's trying to play to his base and just have a real narrow-casted presidency, that the whole point of which is to avoid having 20 Republican senators remove him from office because the base is still on his side. And it's going to make him look really bad compared to what could be the really nice face of the Democrats in 2020. I mentioned a couple weeks ago that Amy Klobuchar was one of my early favorites as a presidential candidate. And here is also Face the Nation, 2 minutes, 20 seconds of Amy Klobuchar talking about immigration, not directly responding to the evilness from Stephen Miller you just saw, but giving a more positive, compassionate, humane view on immigration, much closer to my own view, as I will discuss after we watch that final news clip for the program tonight over here.
As we mentioned, you sit on the Judiciary Committee. I want to ask you about some testimony before your committee this week from Customs and Border Patrol. We mentioned the case here of this 7-year-old from Guatemala, this migrant girl who died tragically after passing into U.S. territory. Should the commissioner of CBP said to you during that testimony that this had happened? It wasn't disclosed until days later.
Yeah, I just went back and looked at that testimony. I look at the face of that sweet little girl, 7-year-old Jacqueline Call. She looks like the faces of the kids that were in my daughter's 2nd grade class. And he came and testified before us, and I asked him if he regretted any of the Trump immigration policies. And he said he did, but he didn't even mention that this had happened. Under law, they're supposed to tell Congress within 24 hours if someone dies. So we clearly have to get to the bottom of that. But the second thing is comprehensive immigration reform so that we can have some order at the border and that we can have a smart plan that works for our country, including a path to citizenship and doing something about states like mine where we don't have enough workers in our fields and in our factories, making sure that we have smart policies that work with fencing and other things. And that's not what they're talking about. What they're talking about is chaos.
Are you laying responsibility on the U.S. government for this little girl's death?
I just want to get it investigated and figure out exactly what happened. But what I do believe is that if we just keep playing games with people's lives, that's what they're doing. They're playing games with people's lives. They're playing games with a shutdown, which last time cost $20 billion, the Ted Cruz shutdown for our economy. They are playing games with members of Congress. They take the leaders of Congress into the White House and create a media circus instead of just sitting down and negotiating. Do I think that we can avoid a shutdown? Of course I do, because there's people on both sides of the aisle that want to find common ground. I think that's possible. But the way that they're acting is not furthering the attempt to make sure that our government is steady at a time when the stock market is careening and we've got a judge throwing out the health care bill.
I want to quickly ask you about a sexual harassment bill that you have been
So what do you think? Who has a more appealing message, more appealing face, and I don't know, maybe even more appealing hair for 2020 for the communicating to the American people on immigration? Is it Amy Klobuchar or Stephen Miller? And I don't know why the hair. I don't know why people are focusing on Stephen Miller's hair. I mean, it was kind of embarrassing, but I saw one person saying that on Twitter. I can't remember who it was. Like, this is someone who has like no real friends to tell him that looks terrible. But I don't know. Don't they have like staff people who are supposed to do like hair and makeup? I don't know. You can let me know what you think. That is, of all, with a dead 7-year-old girl, Stephen Miller's hair seems like the one of the more silly things to focus on. So I want to just point that out after having made all those comments. But the real important thing is that I think the Democratic message is much more appealing, much more humane, much more compassionate when you compare those two clips. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I'm been reading the live comments along the way. I appreciate. I think I broke 300 viewers at one point. I've had a bunch of super chat contributions. I even had a couple more here at the end. I want to give everybody credit here when I do my little screenshot here. So wait, hold on. I know I'm kind of hold on. I'm actually going to update my software so that I can do screenshots a lot more easily. But here, let me export this as there we go. So yeah, if you want to see all my super chat contributions so far. And I will be doing a show next Sunday, pre-Christmas Eve. I'm not Christian. I don't celebrate Christmas, so it doesn't matter to me. And it might be a shorter show. A lot of times they do these weird. Sometimes they have book authors on, so I don't know how many clips I'll have. But who knows? Maybe there'll be a big Robert Mueller revelation in the next week. Things keep. There always seems to be breaking news, but I will be back next week. I always try to remember to blow out those candles. There was 1 week I forgot, and they were burning for several hours, and then I finally remembered. But thank you for all those super chat contributions. And before I finish up the show here, I did promise a bonus Dash and Sandy clip. This was right before the show started. I noticed that Dash was right outside, right over there outside my little studio here, and Sandy was already inside, and they briefly sort of interacted in the 11-second clip over here. And of course, Sandy is still lying down right over there, sleeping. And my one live viewer, I always appreciate having Sandy here. I appreciate all of the live viewers online who comment along the way and give me my super chat contributions that help when it seems like I'm about to get a copyright infringement claim on this video. I don't know what it's from, but maybe it's Good Morning America and the Michael Cohen clip. I guess we'll find out, or I'll find out later. And that's why I also appreciate the people who support me on Patreon at a link I put down in the video description. You can give me a monthly contribution on Patreon or a one-time contribution on PayPal. For people who give $5 or where's my at the $5 level, I've got these hashtag LiberalViewer weatherproof vinyl stickers. At the $10 level, you get the Pocket Constitution and the sticker. That's both per month and on PayPal. Or you can just give me a thumbs up, give me a supportive comment. Tell me that you want me to keep doing this show all the way through the impeachment. That's actually my plan at the moment. So until next week and for the foreseeable future, I will be doing this show, and I will be seeing all of you around the internet.